So now when the topic of freight damage or loss comes into play, usually freight brokers get a little bit nervous, especially new freight brokers. And I think that comes from the picture that you have in your mind. You're driving down the highway, you come upon a trucking accident, and you see people that may be injured, and then you see freight littered throughout the highway. And you start saying to yourself, as a freight broker, am I responsible for what's happened in this accident? Am I responsible for paying for the shipper's freight? What's the real deal here? This seems like a whole lot of responsibility, and it can be a little bit overwhelming. So in this video today, I'm going to give you 3 things that you need to know about freight damage or freight loss. So let's get into the business. So now before we get started, let's make sure that we do all of the good things, like, subscribe, make sure you hit that notification bell, and then you won't miss anything. And if you're interested in learning more about the freight broker business, check out my free 5-video series titled How the Load Movement Process Works, link in the description. So now you might be surprised to know that freight damage or cargo loss is not uncommon in the trucking world. And anytime you have 3 parties involved with the shipper, the freight broker, and the carrier, when an accident takes place, there's always going to be finger pointing. So I want to make sure that you're prepared when the fingers start pointing. So here's what you need to know. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to talk about that I think that you need to know when it comes down to freight cargo damage or loss is the Mack Amendment. And the Mack Amendment regulates the relationship between shipping companies and the owners of the goods under shipment. And the definition in and of itself implies that freight brokers should have at least a working knowledge of how the Mack Amendment works and who it applies to. Now, for some reason, we have the idea as freight brokers that freight brokers are not included as part of the Mack Amendment. And although it's not expressly stated, there have been instances where freight brokers have been held liable, and you should definitely know when those times are and how to avoid it. The second thing that I think is important for you to know is to always act like who you are. If you are a broker, make sure you're not representing yourself as a carrier. And you probably say, hey, yeah, Brandon, I wouldn't represent myself as a carrier. I'm a broker. But unfortunately, you're probably already representing yourself as having carrier operations, and you don't even know it. Because it's not about how you label yourself, but more so about how you conduct yourself. And if the shipper gets the impression that you are a carrier because you're conducting yourself as having carrier operations through your marketing, through your communication with the shipper, if they get the impression that you are a carrier who is actually picking up the load and providing the sole source of contact, then you could be considered liable because the shipper is seeing you as a carrier and not as a broker. So it's our responsibility to make sure that we are communicating to the shipper who we are in our messaging, in our marketing, so it's clear that you are a freight broker. So now the third and final thing that I think you should know is that no, freight brokers are usually not responsible for freight claims. But unfortunately, the Mack Amendment is really not clear on who's a freight broker and who's a carrier. And you have courts that can exploit that. You got a lot of gray area within the Mack Amendment, and sometimes courts can pull freight brokers into the responsibility of carriers. And when that happens, of course, freight brokers are held liable. So you as a freight broker have to make sure that you're always conducting yourself as a freight broker, and then on top of that, you have to make sure that you're not doing anything like that negligent hiring. Because when you negligently hire a carrier, meaning you go out and hire a carrier that's not qualified, then you can definitely be considered liable at that time. And quick summary, we just talked about the 3 things that you should know about freight claims. Number 1, we talked about the Mack Amendment. What is it? How does it work? And who does it apply to? And number 2, we talked about why it's always important for us to conduct ourselves as brokers, never as carriers. And number 3, we said that even though freight brokers are usually not liable for freight claims, that we always have to do our part and make sure that we're hiring qualified drivers. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. I hope this information has been helpful. One last thing that I want to give you before I go is that your life is 100% your responsibility. And when you take complete ownership, complete responsibility for your own life, for your own success, I've found that you're very much more likely to achieve the success that you want to achieve. See you at the top, because the bottom is much too crowded.